In my last video, I said I took a step back from audio to get into something else, and that was 3D printing. And in particular, I got into designing things for 3D printing because, the idea of 3D printing is awesome, but what really makes it useful is if you can design things to print in it, custom design parts to print in it. And that's what I did. I learned a new design program, FreeCAD, and got very good at, reasonably good at using that. And for the past 2 months, 3 months, actually, I've been doing that. I've been learning that program and designing and printing various parts. One of those things that I designed and printed was this right here. This looks like a speaker, but what it is in actuality is a passive radiator idea or concept that I designed and printed just to see if it would be feasible. And I haven't gotten around to testing it yet. I need to build a box with an actual woofer in it and tune this, tune the arrangement to work well with this, but that'll be something coming up. In the meantime, as you can see, it looks pretty neat. It's a flat cone. I started with an actual cone shape, but I didn't like the way that looked. It didn't print properly. The flat shape works just as well, especially for something like this, where the actual drive for this comes from pressure inside the box. Okay, so that's coming up, testing that and maybe going further with the idea. Another thing is that on my last video I talked about stepping back from audio, but the video before that I talked about and I showed the hearing aid thing that I came up with, the one that uses the actual real hearing aid receivers that fit in my ears. And I was using that for a couple months and it was working fantastic. Not perfect, but very close to it. However, what happened there, because there are wires soldered on, and I would have to take it out and put it in whenever I got up to go do anything. Say if I'm sitting here listening or watching something and I have to use the washroom, I have to get up, take those out, go upstairs, come back down, put them in. Eventually, the wires broke going into the receiver. Well, it was this one over here. The wire broke off, and I tried to fix it, but those wires are so tiny. I managed to fix it, but it didn't last. So I said, there has to be a different way to do this. And I came up with this, and I made a post about this on the community tab on this channel. Once again, it's a 3D printed contraption. This is a gooseneck, so it's adjustable. Okay, that was a little bit of a learning curve too, to make these things so that they'll work properly and adjust. And on the ends of each one are little speakers that have a full range driver inside here. And then I just used the same thing that I had set up for for the receivers to drive this. I used exactly the same setup, exactly the same amplifier actually, but I fed it from my miniDSP, which I set up again to, I had it taken off, it's been sitting to one side since I built the 10-channel amp. The 10-channel amp, of course, has the active crossovers inside of it to drive my main speaker, so I didn't need the miniDSP anymore. But I put it back in action to mainly to give delay for these, so that they would be time aligned with my main speakers. And that worked okay. I'm not going to say it worked okay. It worked great. The only issue that I had with it was that since these things were up, okay, I'm going to try to do this without snagging too much, up behind my head, this is mounted on the chair. That's what that piece of wood is for. to mount it on the chair. These are out here, like kind of pointed sort of towards my ears. And with these playing, the singer's voice was inside my head, very much like you would have with headphones. And not a bad effect, but something I could do with that. And it was only when I was playing music. Like if I was watching a show or something, the way your mind works, it'll trick you, right? It'll tell you that if you're watching something, the voice is coming from there. But if you're just sitting there with your eyes closed, listening to music, and there's a singer, and the singer's voice is coming through these things here, even if they're time aligned with the main speakers, the voice will be inside your head. And nothing I could do with that would change it, you know, like adjusting the time alignment or anything like that. So I went with that for about 3 weeks, I think. I was using that, maybe 2 weeks. And I said, well, maybe the idea that I could go with to try is to set up another driver here in my listening arrangement that handles those frequencies that I'm deficient in my hearing. Because my hearing is damaged, and it, like, I can hear things at 4K, but they're significantly less than what they should be. So I said, what if I set up a pair of drivers, one for each channel, that put out those frequencies at a higher volume than my main speakers and the side speakers that I have do right now. As in, those would be the hearing assist that I would need. So I tried that, and to my absolute surprise, that worked the best of all. I mean, if I could take the very best hearing aids and put it in my ears and come down here and listen, they wouldn't be any better than these speakers that I made here. And here's one right here. This is actually a professional compression driver that is 105 decibels, but then I designed and 3D printed a horn to attach to the front that actually boosts that up to over 110 decibels. And that might sound crazy high to have in such a small room here. But what it does when you boost up the sensitivity like that is you can play it at the volume you need to play it at, and it won't distort. Okay, so if I were to EQ my main speakers to try to give me that response, the distortion would go off the charts because they would be putting out too much volume, more volume than they're capable of. Okay, now these things sit like in my line of fire here, pointing towards me, and they're a little bit closer than my side speakers and my main speakers. And what they do is, okay, what the response looks like if I were to measure it from here is that it's kind of peaked up a little bit in the higher frequencies, rather than, you know, that natural slope that you get from a properly set up listening setup. Okay, you would have more bass, you know, a moderate amount of mid-range, and then it would kind of slope off towards the higher frequencies. This is not flat. It's actually kind of humped up a little bit, maybe 3 decibels in the 4K to around 10K range, which is what I have these crossed over at, because these are being driven once again by a separate amp. This time I cobbled together something very quickly from a couple of LM3886 amplifiers, chip amps, and I'm going to make a permanent version of that coming out. Actually, I started making it, and once again fed from the miniDSP to delay the signal so it's time aligned and also act as the crossover. Okay, so eventually, once I have these absolutely dialed in to where I know they're perfect, which are very close to now, I can replace that as well with a what is it called? Analog network, very much like I did with the main speakers. So here's the horn again. As you can see, I painted the front with a metallic gray color, and it's kind of glossy to make it look more glitzy. I printed it with this yellow PLA plastic that I had that I wanted to use up. So I printed 2 of these, and they're printed in 2 pieces. And you can see from this arrangement, the way I modeled it is that they've got little ears on the outside here that go down on the print bed. And what those ears do, they're removable. Well, I have to remove them afterwards, is they anchor it to the bed so that that edge won't curl up. Because that was a problem I was having before with trying to print cones. That very edge that I had there was trying to curl up, and those little discs anchor it right down to the build plate and make it so that doesn't happen. And then the 2 halves get glued together, and you have what you have here. Okay, now you can see on the inside, and you'll show that more in the model, it looks like there's a phase plug in there. What that actually is something to make it so that I wouldn't need support for the print. This, like both halves of these cones, print without any support whatsoever. That piece that's in the middle there might be acting as a phase plug, but I doubt it. I don't think it's having any real effect on the response. I measured these on their own, and the response is really good, really nice and flat. And I'm getting, like I said, a good boost, a clean, good boost, starting at around, I think it starts around 1200 from these horns. I have to measure them again to make sure. And I measured it, but then I threw away the measurement because I was just doing it to set them up to make sure there were no crazy peaks in there that I have to deal with. But no, it was nice and clean, good output. So if you want this, like if you have compression drivers that had this bolt pattern, this compression driver, by the way, is the SB Audience Bianco 44 CD-K. Okay, this is a fairly inexpensive pro compression driver, 1-inch throat, and 105 decibel sensitivity, like I said. I also designed and printed bolts because I didn't have any M6 bolts, and I didn't want to go anywhere and try to find those. You know, here in Canada, it's kind of difficult sometimes to find metric hardware. You're going to find the Imperial stuff more easily. And these print in 2 pieces and glue together once again. And they actually thread in there and hold really well. Okay, so yeah, you can print those as well. Now, if you want to try this out for yourself, you know, pick up a couple of these, or maybe with the same bolt pattern, another model. Print the things. If you're into 3D printing, there's a model, there's a link to the model in the description. You can see it includes the bolts too. And these are shoulder bolts with a knob on there to grip it so that you can, you don't need a wrench to turn it. You can turn it with your fingers. Okay. And there's less chance of stripping it out or breaking it off. Okay, and if it's too long, I made them a little bit longer because I actually made these for a bracket that mounts it on a stick, kind of a temporary stand. If they're too long, you can always cut them off or shorten them in the slicer before you print them. Okay, so get a good measurement. As it is right now, the threading on this is about 3/4 of an inch. That can be shortened to any length that you need. Okay. So that's it for this one. I just wanted to, let you know what was going on. Oh, I had another comment about was from on my last video saying my room looks different. What looks different from my room? What looks different about my room from the very first videos that I made in here when I finished building it was that I painted the walls. Okay, I just got sick of too much plywood. So it's almost 2 years ago now that I painted the walls. And that was kind of an adventure in itself because I painted them over the water-based polyurethane and the paint didn't stick. So, I mean, all I'd have to do is look at it the wrong way and it would come off. So I wound up peeling all that off, and that was quite a bit of fun, I gotta say. It's like peeling scabs, It's So I had this wall over here fully painted. I had to peel all that off. Luckily, I didn't have this one done. So I primed it with the proper primer after sanding and the new paint stuff. And the new paint is a very, very dark blue. Okay? And it makes the room more moody, which matches my disposition.